was a girl about 9 or 10 years old, I played soccer. That was about 10 years ago now, but I still have a really good memory of it. We used to have games every Saturday morning, which was a fun time because I was on a team with a lot of my friends, and every week after the game, we would hang out at one of our houses. One day, I remember coming out of the game to sit on the bench and seeing a man sitting in a chair by himself watching the game. I didn't recognize him as anyone's parent, and he wasn't really sitting next to anyone. I was kind of curious as to who he was, but pretty soon after that I went back in the game, and I didn't have any more time to care about it. After the game was over, a lot of us went to our teammate Sarah's house. She was an only child, and her parents were pretty chill, so she was our favorite teammate's house to go to. There was about 6 of us at her house. We hung out in her room for a while, and then went outside. When we did, I noticed a car parked across the street. It was a brownish silver color and looked pretty average. However, I noticed the man in the driver's seat was looking at us and was the same man from the game that I had seen sitting by himself. I asked Sarah if she knew him, and she said no. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but after a few minutes I realized just how strange it was. After a while, we went back inside. We all went back into Sarah's room and decided to watch a movie. About 20 minutes later, we heard a tapping at the window. I looked to see a man smiling and waving from outside the window. It was the same man from earlier. We all screamed, and a couple seconds later, her parents came rushing into the room. The man was gone now, but we all told Sarah's father that a man had been at the window. He ran outside, and we heard some shouting, but he came back in several minutes later and said that the man had drove away. The police were called, and all of us had to go home. I'm really glad it wasn't my house. I don't talk to Sarah much anymore, but I don't believe the man ever came back. My brother and I both played baseball growing up. I'm a couple years older than him, so we played at different age levels, but we played in the same league, so most of our games were at one park. This happened when I was about 12. On one night, we both had games. Mine started an hour before his, so I got done first. I watched his game for a little while, but then I got the itch to throw the ball around, so I walked to the edge of the park where there was a little woods and an open field. I would often go there and throw a tennis ball against the side of an old hockey rink that happened to be there. As I was throwing my ball against the rink that night, an older-looking man appeared from the woods. He walked out, and I thought this was strange, but for some reason, I didn't mind it too much. The man then walked over to me and said hi. He said I looked like a really good ball player and asked me to show him my throwing form. He told me that he used to do some coaching and that I was a really good player. Then he said that he had a really nice glove in his truck and that he needed to get rid of it. I should have seen how sketchy this was looking back, but at the time, I believed him. He told me to follow him, and we started to walk towards his truck. We walked kind of around the woods to see a little parking lot with an old beat-up truck in it. I noticed that the man smelled bad like cigarettes, and he was starting to give me the creeps. We finally arrived at his truck. He told me that the glove was behind the passenger seat in his truck, and I was smaller than him, so I should get in and grab it. I peeked in the truck, but I didn't see any baseball equipment at all. As I leaned in, I felt the man position himself right behind me. This made me a little uncomfortable, and I backed away. The man then said, "What are you doing? I told you to get it." I said that I didn't really need a glove, and it was all right. He then nudged me and said to get in the truck in a commanding voice. At this point, I knew I was in trouble, and I tried to run away, but the man had grabbed my shoulders. I did the only thing I could think of in that moment, which was to kick him as hard as I could in his shin. When I did, his grip loosened and I was able to free myself. I used that opportunity to run as fast as I could back to where I came from. The man did not chase after me, as I had to have been much faster than him. Unfortunately, I was unable to even think about getting a license plate or anything like that. When I told my parents, they ended up reporting it, but I don't believe anything ever came of it. Last fall, I went to an NFL football game with my brother. We had seats that were in one end zone, about 50 rows up. There were fans from both teams at the game, and throughout the game, they would occasionally yell at each other. Pretty typical NFL game stuff, but when the game was almost over, things got pretty intense. I heard a fan behind me begin yelling, and I looked behind me to see another fan charging him and then tackle him. The two fans fell over their rows of seats and into mine and began fighting. I did my best to break up the fight and held one man back. The man must have seen I had a jersey on for the team he was against, and then punched me in the face. I responded by pushing the man away, and he fell over another row of seats and then began to charge back at me, but was held back. Some of the fans around me reassured me that I didn't do anything wrong, and they made sure I was all right. The game ended shortly after, and my team won. My brother and I walked out through the thick crowd of people and left the stadium into the city streets. Each block that we walked farther from the stadium, there would be less and less people. We had parked pretty far away because it was cheaper and we didn't mind walking. It ended up being about a 30-minute walk. We got close to the parking garage that we parked in, and when I happened to look behind me, I noticed there was a man following us. It looked like the same man that tried to fight me earlier. He was about 50 feet back. I didn't know if he was following me or if he happened to park where I did. We got into the parking garage and he followed us in shortly after we went. As we approached my car, I heard the man start to yell. He said, "Hey." His yell echoed through the entire parking garage. I ignored him. The man then pulled something from his pocket and threw it in our direction. It was a rock. Then he did it again. He came closer to hitting us. My brother and I quickly got in the car and started the engine. We started to drive off and the man began running and throwing rocks at our car. He hit the car a couple of times but did not break any windows. We pulled out as fast as we could. We were able to drive away, and when we got home, we looked at the car to see several large dents. We called the parking garage and reported the incident, but have yet to hear back from them. My sister used to play volleyball. She played in about 5th or 6th grade when I was around 8 or 9 years old. The games, in my opinion, were super boring. They played in a high school and on Saturdays typically. One day, during her game, I got bored and decided to wander the high school. I walked upstairs and down the hall. It was a super old high school, and this was back in the late 1990s, so all the classrooms had chalkboards. I wandered into a classroom with the doors open to see writing on a chalkboard that said, "Watch your back." I thought this was a kid doing a prank. I decided to draw a picture on the board and erase the writing. As I began erasing, I heard a noise come from the back of the classroom. I looked behind me to see a kid come from behind a desk and start running at me. I dropped the chalk and ran out of the room. I ran down the hall and back to the volleyball game as fast as I could. After that, I always found the games a little more interesting.